We start the Gemara on the bottom of the Vav Amud Beis. We had over here a machlokes between Rab Shimon ben Gamliel and Rab Eliezer ben Rab Yosi. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says that the time to read Megillah when there's two Adars is in the second Adar. And Rab Eliezer ben Rab Yosi says the time to read the Megillah is the first Adar as well. If you read it the first Adar, you don't have to read it over in the second Adar. So the Gemara brought before a source for their machlokes that it's because it says Shana Shana, and they argue it has to be like every year. But the question is, does it have to be like every year in the Adar that's near Shvat, or does it have to be like every year in the Adar near Nisan? Okay, now the Gemara brings another reason. So the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, time the Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Reason for Rab Shimon ben Gamliel when he says that you read the Megillah and the second Adar, mehacha. It's from this pasuk. Chsiv lekayim esegeres hapurim hazais. And then the pasuk adds hashenis, the second letter. Why does it say hashenis? To teach you that when you have a second adar, you read it on the second shenis, on the second adar. So now the Gemara says, so what that means is we have now two sources for the reason that we read the Megillah the second adar. This pasuk here, hashenis, and the pasuk we brought before, which is b'chol shana v'shana, that has to be like every year in the adar that's near Nisan. So the Gemara explains, v'yitzterech, what? We'll see in a minute. We need this pasuk of Hashenis telling me that it's the second Adar. And also and we also need this pasuk b'chol shana v'shana. Why? If I would just have the pasuk b'chol shana v'shana, have a miniki cushion. I would say like our question we had before, that maybe it has to be like every year in the Adar that's near Shvat. It's not this conclusive. And on the other hand, so that's why we have the second pasuk of Hashenis that says that no, it has to be the second Adar. On the other hand, via Shminin Hashenis, if it would only have the pasuk Hashenis, Havamine, so then I would say B'tchila B'rishain U'B'sheni, that you can read the Megillah in the first or in the second Adar. You can read in either one. So therefore, Kamash Malan, B'chol Shana V'Shana, telling you that it has to be like every year, that you could only read it in one Adar, you don't read it in both Adars, and it has to be in the second Adar. So now the question is, Rabbi Eliezer bar Yosi, Hi Hashenis, my Yavidle. How does he interpret this Hashenis that it says in the pasuk here, if it doesn't refer to the second Adar? He says you read it in the first Adar. What happened? When the letters were sent out to establish Purim as a Yontif, and first the letters were sent out to the Yidden that lived only in Shushan, and they accepted it as a Yontif. And then if you look in the Megillah, in this pasuk where it says Yigeres HaPurim Hazos Hashenis, they sent out letters a second time, and they sent it out b'chol olam kulai, to the Yidden in the entire world to accept upon themselves the Yontif. So it doesn't refer to the second month; it refers to a second letter that went out for all Yidden to accept it as a Yontif. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Sholchalem Esther lechachamim. Esther sent and requested by the Chachamim, Kav'uni l'dairis, establish me for all generations. Rashi says she was asking that it should be a yontif to read Megillah on it. Okay. That's one thing she asked for. So Shalchula, they sent back to her, Kina at meireres aleinu lebeinu umais. If you're going to read this story every year about what happened, that Yidden fought with the Goyim and the Gzeira, and that they were victorious against them, so it's going to be meirer, jealousy or fighting. The Goyim are going to come and fight with the Yidden. Shalchalahem, so Esther sent back to the Chachamim, no. I'm already written, the story of the history of what happened there is written in the history books of Malkim Modeh Paras. So the Goyim are well aware of this story. The fact that we're going to read it on Purim is not going to be Ma'ir Rakina. This is one thing she asked.
Yeah, why did the question if it's the same thing with his beside?
That's going to be Ma'ir Rakina. Okay. So the Gemara, another thing she asked was, and here the Gemara brings who said this, and Rav Chanina, Rav Yochanan, Rav Chaviva. You have four Amirayim that said the following thing. Now the Gemara says, Masnu bekula seder moyed kol ki hai zuge. Anytime you have these four Amirayim together mentioned in any place in seder moyed, so chilufi Rav Yochanan uma'ayil Rav Yonasan. So some would take out Rav Yochanan and instead put in Rabbi Yonasan. Okay, but so we have here these four Amirayim that said as follows. Sholchalem Esther l'chachamim, that Esther sent to the Chachamim and asked of them, Kisvuni l'dairis, write me for all generations. What does this refer to? That she should be written to become part of Ksuvim, part of Tanakh. Not only to be read on Yontif and Purim, but she should be written as part of Tanakh. Shalchula, so they answered her back, no, we can't do this. We have to have a source to include your story in Ksuvim. What's the story of Purim? It's about Haman that made a Gzeira against Yidden, and who was Haman? A descendant of Amalek. Right? So basically she's asking that this whole story here about Amalek, or a descendant of Amalek, should be written into Ksuvim. So the Gemara says, but it says, Haloi kasafti lecha shlishim. It says in the Pasuk that the Eibishter says, I wrote about this story of Amalek 3 times. What does this mean? Shlishim v'lo revim. That it's only to be written 3 times and not 4 times. So therefore, since the story is already written 3 times before this, you have it in Beshalach, then you have it in Kiseitze, then you have it in Shmuel with the whole story of Agag. So it's already written 3 times, so we can't write it a 4th time. This is the story of Amalek. This is the story of Amalek. Until they found the following pasuk in the Torah and they darshaned it, that it says, Ksoiv Zois Zikarim Baseifa. You should write the story of Amalek as a remembrance in the Sefer. So they darshaned it as follows. Ksoiv Zois Mashakosov Kan, that you should write what it says over here, the story that it says over here. What does it mean, Ksoiv Zois? That refers to Mashakosov Kan, what it says in Beshalach, Ubi Mishnah Torah. And what it says in Mishnah Torah in Parshas Kiseitze, that's all considered to be 1 time. Because they're both in Chumash, that goes into Ksoiv Zois, 1 time. And then when it says Zikarain, should be remembered, that's Mashakosov ben Nevi'im. That refers to what was mentioned in Shmuel and Nevi'im. And then when it says Bas Sefer, what is Bas Sefer? Mashakosov ben Megillah. That is when it's written in the Megillah, so therefore they had a source that it could be written in the Megillah. So there's a sikh where the Rebbe talks about this Gemara. There's a few different sikhs where the Rebbe talks about this Gemara. I'll mention one in Chelik Tezayin, where the Rebbe there says that in our Gemara it says that it's Esther. Esther is the one that asked that it should be a yontif to read the Megillah and that it should be included in the Ksuvim. Doesn't mention anything about Mordechai, but in Yerushalmi it says that Mordechai requested. And the Rebbe says, if you look there in Yerushalmi, it says Mordechai did not request about reading the Megillah or about having the Megillah written in Ksuvim. Mordechai wanted it to be a yontiv, it should be celebrated, mishta v'simcha, like every single yontiv, but not reading the Megillah or writing it into Ksuvim. And the Rebbe says the reason is because Mordechai and Esther, of course, played a big role in the whole nest of Purim, but each one in a different way. Mordechai was more the Ruchnius, and therefore he wanted it to be more of a Ruchnius the yontiv, like every yontiv. Esther was more the Gashmi. She's the one that went to Achashverosh. She's the one that made the party. She was more the Gashmis of the nest. And therefore, her request was not just a Ruchni Zigiyantov, but it should be written on a Sefer. It should be read. You should say it with your mouth. She should say the whole story. So each one had their part of what they wanted, how the Yontiv should be celebrated, according to the part that they participated in the miracle. That's Bepayel, it's called Megillah Esther because she's Taka the one that asked it to be written and to be read, not Mordechai. Yeah. So the Gemara, it's about including Megillah Esther in Ksuvim, that it should be part of Ksuvim. That's what she was asking for.
Right, we don't have that now, do we?
Yes, of course. Chamish Megillah is part of Ksuvim, sure. It's part of Ksuvim. Now the Gemara brings a machlokes about this. Zok the Gemara kitanoi. Whether it's part of Ksuvim or not is machlokes tanoim. This pasuk we just brought. There's 2 ways how to interpret it. Ksoiv Zais. So now the Tanakama in this brayso reads it as follows. Ksoiv Zais means mashakosov kan. That refers only to what's in Beshalach, not to what's in Kiseitze. That's 1 time. Zikarain, when it says in the pasuk Zikarain, mashakosov b'Mishnah Torah. That refers to what there is in Mishnah Torah in Parshas Kiseitze. And then when it says Bas Sefer, mashakosov b'Nevi'im. That refers to the story in Shmuel and Nevi'im. That's it. So you can't have Megillah be part of Ksuvim. Divrei Rabbi Yeshua. That's the Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. So he argues with what we said before. Rabbi Lazar Midoy exactly like we dashed before. Ksoiv Zais goes on both Mashakosov Kan Ubi Mishnah Torah. They're both counted as 1 because they're both in Chumash. Zikara in Mashakosov ben Nevi'im and Baseifer Mashakosov ben Megillah, that it is part of the Ksuvim. Amar Rav Yudah Mashmuel Esther Megillas Esther Eina Metames Hayadayim. If you touch it, it will not make your hands tamei. Why should it make your hands tamei? So Rashi here brings the Gzeira that Chachamim made in Masechta Shabbos. What happened was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Kayanim would store their truma. They didn't want to store it together with all the food in the cabinet. They wanted it to be in a separate place. So they would store their truma together with Sfarim, or together with scrolls that they had then. What happened? Mice came and ate the food and they would eat up the scrolls. So Chacham did not want them to store Truma near the Sfarim, so they made a Gzeira that if you touch Sfarim, your hands become a Sheni L'Tumah. So like this, no one will want to store Truma near Sfarim. That was the Gzeira Chachamim made. But that's only for anything that's in the Tanakh, scrolls that are part of Torah, Nevi'im, or Ksuvim. So what Rav Yudah Mashmul is basically saying is, Megillah Esther is not part of Ksuvim, and therefore that Gzeira, that your hands become Tameh, does not apply to Megillah Esther. So in fact, the Gemara, Lememre, shall we say, the Sava Shmuel, Esther, Lav, Beruach HaKodesh Nemra. Does it mean that he's saying that the Megillah Esther was not said Beruach HaKodesh, and that's the reason why it's not included in Ksuvim, and that's why you don't become Tameh? But that can't be. V'hama Shmuel, but Shmuel said, and the Gemara is going to quote it soon here, Esther, Beruach HaKodesh Nemra. Megillah Esther was written with Ruach HaKodesh. So the Gemara answers, Nemra, Likros, yes, it was said with Ruach HaKodesh for the purpose to read it on the Yontif of Purim, to do the mitzvah of reading Megillah. But V'lei Nemra Lichtov. But according to Shmuel, it wasn't said to be written as part of Ksuvim. And therefore your hands don't become Tameh like all the other scrolls of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. So Meisvei, the Gemara asks on this, it says in the Braisa as follows. There's other Sfarim that there's also a machlekes or suffix about them if they're part of Ksuvim or not. So Rab Meir says Koheles Einem Metamas Yadayim. Koheles, written by Shlomo HaMelech, also will not make hands Tameh. It's not part of Ksuvim. And then he said Umachlekes b'Shir HaShirim. Regarding Shir HaShirim, there's a machlekes, and this is a machlekes between Beishamai and Beis whether it's part of Ksuvim or not. Rabbi Yossi said, Shir HaShirim metames hayadayim. Shir HaShirim for sure makes your hand tamei. It's for sure part of Ksuvim. Umachlekes b'Keheles. Regarding Keheles, it's a machlekes if it's part of Ksuvim or not. Rab Shimon said, Keheles, there's a machlekes about Keheles, whether it's part of the Ksuvim or not. And this is a case where it's Mikule Beishamai. Beishamai is lenient about this. He says that it's not part of Ksuvim, and Chumre B'Sil. And B'Sil is stringent. He says it is. Avol then Shimon finishes off and he says a point which seemingly nobody argues with him about this. Ros and Shir HaShirim and Esther metamen esayedayim. So maybe regarding Shir HaShirim we had a machlekes before, but then he says Ros and Esther, he says, are metamen esayedayim because they are part of Ksuvim. So the Gemara is bringing here that in this Braisa you see it says clearly that Esther is part of Ksuvim. So how did Shmuel say that it's not? So the Gemara says we have already the answer based on what we learned before. Huda Amar, Shmuel holds Rabbi Yeshua, like what we had already before. Rabbi Yeshua said that it's not part of Ksuvim. He darshan Ksoiv Zayis Ikarim Basefer, that Basefer goes on Shmuel and it can't be part of Ksuvim. Now the Gemara brought up the other things over here, Keheles and so on, so the Gemara brings another Braisa about this. Tanya, Rab Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Keheles ein metames hayadayim. Keheles is not metame your hand, it's not part of Ksuvim. Why not? Mipnei shechachmasai shel Shloimeh. What you have in Keheles is the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech, and that's it. It's his wisdom. It wasn't necessarily even said Beruach HaKodesh. It wasn't included in part of Ksuvim at all. Amrulai, so they said to Rab Shimon ben Menashe, V'chi zubul vadama. If you're saying this is just the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech, this is all the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech. V'alei kfar nema. There's another pasuk that it says that Vayidaber shloishes alafim mashal. That Shlomo HaMelech spoke 3,000 parables. So he said much more than what we have in the psukim of Keheles. So what is he trying to say? He said if it's just the Chachma, Shlomo HaMelech's Chachma includes much more. These psukim of Keheles that were specifically chosen of what he said, these psukim were said Beruach HaKodesh, and they are part of Ksuvim. And I have another ayah for you that Keheles is part of Ksuvim, because in the end of Keheles it says, Al Toisef Al Dvarov. Don't add to what it says. So in other words, this is it. This is what is included in Ksuvim, and don't add anything else. So this is a ayah that it's part of Ksuvim. Huh? What? The pasuk of... it's a pasuk of Mishlei, correct, in the end of Mishlei. Okay. So now the Gemara explains why are they bringing two rayas against Rab Shimon ben Menashe? Why they're bringing a second raya? Because if you'll answer to the first raya, what was the first raya? That he spoke much more chachma. So you'll say Meimar tu v'amar. He said a lot more chachma, but the ibai ichtiv, v'dibai lo ichtiv. What he wanted, he wrote down as part of Ksuvim, and what he wanted, he didn't write down. So just because he said much more, it's not a raya that it's going to be part of Ksuvim, what's here. He decided what he wants to write down, and what he didn't want, he didn't write down, but not necessarily what he wrote is part of Ksuvim. Tashema, that's why it brings a second raya, al Toisef al Dvarav. It's saying that don't add, because what's written is holy and is part of ksuvim, and whatever else of his chachmas do not add to it. Okay, so this is a machlokes regarding Sefer of Kehelis. Now going back to what was mentioned before, that Shmuel said that Esther was said Baruch HaKodesh. So Gemara here brings a bunch of different Tanoim that speak about this and bring a proof to the fact that Megillah Esther was said with Ruach HaKodesh. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. How do I know this? Shenema, because it says in the Megillah, Vayayme Haman Beliboy. Haman said in his heart. That's when Achashverosh was saying that the Vil of Malchus and so on. And Haman says to himself, probably the king means me. So how does the Megillah know this? It must be that it was written Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Kiva Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. How do I know it was written Baruch HaKodesh? And Nemat says, Vatihi Esther Noises Chaim Be'enik Kol Re'yah. She found grace in the eyes of all that saw her. How do we know that? It must be Baruch HaKodesh. Mordechai found out about what Bigsan and Seresh were planning. And how did he know that? Must be that he had Ruach HaKodesh. So the Mefarshim may point out, the Turei and others, that from this you don't really have a raya that the Megillah was written by Ruach HaKodesh, but you have a raya that Mordechai had Ruach HaKodesh. So it's not exactly the same like all the other rayas. Okay. Rabbi Yosi ben Drumaskis Omar Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra Shenemar. It says in the Megillah, after they were fighting over there with the Goyim and Shushan and all over the world, Uba Biza leSholches Yadam. The Yidden did not take anything of any of the spoils. How do we know this? That nowhere in the world they didn't take anything? So it must be Baruch HaKodesh. Amar Shmuel, so Shmuel said, and this is what we quoted before, that Shmuel said it was Baruch HaKodesh, that he avoy Hasam. If I was there when these Tanoim had this discussion, I would have said a source for this that's stronger than all of their sources. And what is this? Shenema, the pasuk says, Kimu v'kiblu. It says, what does Kimu v'kiblu mean? Kimu l'mayla. That the Eibishter above confirmed Mashakivlu Lamata, what the Yidden accepted below. How does the Megillah know what was happening Lamaila? So that's Baruch HaKodesh. Okay, so now Shmuel says that nobody could, my raya is the best raya. So Taisus over here says, well, there's a very big question on Shmuel's raya. There's the famous drasha on Kimu v'Kilu that's brought always in the Maimorim of Chassidus. Kimu Mashakivlu Kfar. Kimu refers to what they fulfilled from Torah, and Kiblu means that they were makabel again now by Purim. So it's a different drasha. Nothing to do with Lamaila. Okay, that's a question of Taisvis, huh? No, it's a drasha that the Gemara says in Shabbos. The Kibbutz Yehudim Chassidus brings back, but this is a drasha in the Gemara in Shabbos. Okay, so Taisvis says that you can make both drashas. Taisvis explains why you can make both drashas. Akapanim. So now the Gemara will explain that all the other sources besides Shmuel could be refuted, but not Shmuel's. Amarave lekul yislu percha, all of them could be refuted. Lebarmin the Shmuel, the less le percha, his can't be refuted. Why not? Rabbi Eliezer. So what did Rabbi Eliezer say? That Haman was said in his heart. How do we know this? So the Gemara says, Svarahu. It's logical that he was thinking this way. There was nobody else that was as prominent to the king as him. And and we see the way he was speaking when the king says, what should I do for a person that I want his honor? And he comes, tells the king, and he's going on, do this for him. So you see how much he's speaking, so you understand that he meant to say, he was saying all of this honor and he had himself in mind. So it's obvious from what he said, what he was thinking. You don't have to read his mind, it's very obvious. Now, what did Rabbi Akiva say? That the raya is from the fact that it says, what did Rabbi Akiva say? Noises Chaim, right. She found grace in everyone's eyes. So the Gemara says, no, but it's also not a raya. Dilme Rabbi Lazar later in the Gemara will say, the Omar, Melamit, Shekol Echad Ve'echad, Nidmis Aloiku Masay. That's Esther. Everybody from all different places, she appeared to them like she's part of their nation, like she looked like people from their country. So therefore, when you see someone that comes from your country, they find favor in your eyes. So that was something that then they saw that she found favor in everyone's eyes. So everyone was able to see this. And also the raya that Rab Meir brought, that how did he know the plan of Bigsan and Seresh? Dilmek Rab Chia Barabe. The Omar, he said, Bigsan v'Seresh Shnei Tarsiim Hoyu. There were people from Tarsiim and they spoke a certain language that no one else understood. But Mordechai, because he was part of the Sanhedrin, so he had to know 70 languages, so he knew what they were saying, and that's how you knew their plan. And Rabbi Yosi ben Drumaskis, Dilmes, so maybe, how did they know that nowhere in the world did the Yidden take anything from the spoils? Dilme Pristiki Shod. Maybe there were agents or shluchim that Yidden that were all over sent to Mordechai and Esther to let them know that we didn't take anything. So that's how they knew. But the Shmuel, what Shmuel said, the Kimu v'Kiblu, which goes on Lamaila, for that there's no refutation. So the Gemara, so now regarding this, Amar Avine, or others at the back says Amar Rove, Hainu Damri Inchi. Regarding this, people say Tov achad pilpul techarifte. One good sharp pepper is better, mimole tsani kari, a full basket of melons. You have all these rayas that seem like very good rayas, but you have one sharp raya of Shmuel that's better than all these rayas. Gemara brings more rayas now. Rav Yosef Amar mehacha. Rav Yosef says you can prove it from the following pasuk. V'yimei Purim eila. The Megillah finishes off these days of Purim layavrim metoich Yehudim. They will not ever go away from the Yidden. So the Megillah is talking about the future. How do we know this? That also has to be Beruach HaKodesh. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar mehacha. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, the Megillah further says, V'zichram lo Yosef mizaram. And the remembrance of this will never go away from their descendants. And that's the Raya talking about the future that was with Ruach HaKodesh. So this Taisu says that the Raya of Rav Nachman by Yitzchak is even a stronger Raya, because the previous pasuk you could say it refers to the Yidden of that generation. It doesn't say for, later. But here it says like Zichram lo Yosef mizaram, even from the descendants of future generations. So that's an even stronger Raya. Said in the Mishnah, Matanis Lav Yoinim. Right? So the Matanis Lav Yoinim is given when you read the Megillah in the second Adar. Tani Rav Yosef, Mishloyach Monois Ish L'Reyeyu. When it says in the Megillah the mitzvah of Mishloyach Monois, so it says Monois plural, and then it says L'Reyehu, to your friend singular. So what do I learn out? Shtei Monois L'Ish Echad. 2 portions of food to 1 person. And then it says Matanis Lav Yoinim. So what is this? Shtei matonos l'shnei b'nei adam. So you have to give 2 matonos to 2 people. In other words, 1 to each evyon. Each evyon has to get 1 matana of money. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya shadalei el Rabbi Oishia. He sent his mishleich manas to Rabbi Oishia. What did he send him? Atma the igla tilsa, a piece of meat that came from a 3rd calf, which is the best meat. That's one thing he sent him, and also the garba the chamra, and he also sent him wine, a bottle of wine. So shalach lei, so Rabbi Yishia sent back to him, ki yamtu banu rabbeinu, mishleich manas l'reyeyo. My teacher, you've been mekayim in what it says, mishleich manas, that you sent mishleich manas to me. You did a mitzvah. So now the Mefarshim ask in this Gemara, what's the chiddush? I mean, of course, he sent him good meat and good wine. Of course, he did a mitzvah. What's the chiddush here? So the Pri Chadash says that the chiddush is that you might think that maybe only food has to be 2 portions of food. Who says wine or any beverage would be good for the mitzvah? That was the chiddush, that even wine is also good. That's the Pri Chadash's pshat. But there is another gersa in this Gemara that what actually happened is he sent him mishleich manas, something that was not very choshev. He sent him a very plain mishleich manas. And he was sort of offended that such a choshev person, Rabbi Yishia, is such a kind of mishleich manas. And then afterwards, he sent him again a very choshev a piece of meat and good wine. And then he said, you were mekayim mishleich manas ish l'reyeyu. So you see from this Gemara, according to this gersa, that you have to send mishleich manas according to the person that you're giving to. That's according to that pshat in this Gemara. Okay. So Rashi takes out what the next words that it says here in the Gemara. Umatanis lav yainim. Rashi is not geiris it, just mishleich manas. Sagt the Gemara, Rabbe shadalei lemari bar mar. So Rabbe sent shleich manas to Mari bar mar, and he sent it with a shliach. He sent it biyad Abaye, in the hands of Abaye. That's the meaning by mishleich manas, because it says in the Megillah mishloyach. So you sent it with a shliach. So he sent it in the hands of Abaye. What did he send him? Moli taske de kashva. A sack full of dates, and also mali kasa kimche da'avshayna. And he also sent them a cupful of these roasted kernels of wheat that you can make very good flour of it. It becomes very sweet because it was roasted. That's what he sent him. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye said to Rabbe about the quality of this mishleich manas that he sent to Mari bar mar, which was a Rosh Hashiva, he was a very choshev person. So Hashta Oma Mari. So now Mari is going to answer you about this mishleich manas that you sent him. He's going to say it with the following mashal: Ichaklo Malka. What happens if a farmer turns into a king? Lahevi dekula mitzah. Again, let me read that one more time. Sorry. Ichaklo Malka lahevi. If a farmer will become a king. Dikule mitzavare loy nachis, that basket that he carries around his neck when he usually has to carry around the food that he needs for the cattle, and when he's a farmer, he doesn't take it off his neck now that he turns into a king. What Abaye was telling Rabbi is, you're sending such a low, small quality Mishloach Manos to such a chashuv person as if he's some kind of a farmer. He's not, now he's a Rosh Hashiva, he became a very chashuv person. You shouldn't send him just some dates and some kernels of wheat. It's not a chashuv Mishloach Manos. Okay. What happened? So now the Mari Barmar sent back to Rabbi with Abaye. What did he send back? Male Taske de Zangvile. He sent him back a sack full of zangvil, which is ginger, umale kasa de pulpalta, and also a cup full of pulpalta riche, of sharp peppers. Yeah, sharp stuff. Both ginger is very sharp, and the sharp pepper. Amar Abayis, now Abayis tells Mari Barmar about the Mishloach Manos that he's sending back to Rabbi. Hashta Amamar, so Rabbi is going to tell me, Ana shadri lechulya, I'm sending him sweet things. V'yu shadri chorfa, and you're sending me back sharp things. Okay, so you see that the whole story about Mishloach Manos and what you send and Chulu was already in the time of the Gemara here. But obviously we're speaking about Heilige Ta'amiroim, and this is on a different level. There must be Seides HaTorah here and what's going on in this Gemara.
Could be food that's prepared and ready to eat.
Could be it was. Yeah, it could be eaten, you could eat them. Amar Abaye said, Ki nafki mi beimar. When I came out from the house of the master, which L'chaira refers to Rabba, so have a savannah, I felt full. He sent me to go to Mari Barma to bring the Mishloach Manos. So when I left Rabba, I was full. Then Kimatoy Hasam, when I came to Mari Barmar's house, Karivuli, they served me shitten soy, 60 plates, the shitten manik data of 60 different pots of food that were cooked. And va'achli buhu shitten plugi, and I ate 60 portions. Ubishula basraisa, and the last thing that was cooked that I ate, havakarolet slikadar, it was a pot roast. And I ate so much, and it was so good the food, uboil meches tza abasra. And I even wanted to eat the plate after I finished everything as well. That's how good this meal was. This is actually the Marsha here says, I think he says it b'derech hatzachis, Marsha says that could be the plate was actually an edible plate, like you have today. They make these edible plates or bowls sometimes. So he said that he wanted to eat the plate as well. So now what's the lesson of this? Obviously the Gemara is not some sense. The Gemara says what the lesson is. So Amar Abaye, Hainu d'Amri Inshi. This is what people say, Kofin Anya, a poor person is poor, is hungry, that is, v'lo and he doesn't even realize how hungry he is. Right? So this is both begashmias and beruchnias as well. A person sometimes ein ani ela bedas. A person sometimes is poor and he doesn't even realize himself how poor he is. Yeah, there's the famous Ayem Yem regarding a person that doesn't daven. So the Ayem Yem there says, "Am daven nicht." So then, man wird niedrig in Grab, und man kennt nicht der eigene Niedrigkeit und Grabkeit. So in other words, a person sometimes is poor, doesn't even know it. That's one lesson from here.
Or when you learn, you see how much you don't know.
Okay, so that's when you start becoming rich. Okay. Inami, another lesson here is Rafche Libsime Shchiach. That there's always place for something that's tasty and geschmack. You'll always find space to eat more. This is also a lesson Beruchnis that everyone spoke about this Barichas and Afabrengen. Sometimes a person feels like there's so much to do. He has to daven, he has to learn, there's nigla, there's chassidus, there's this and there's that. There's so many different things. But if it's geschmack, you find time and space for it. That's the lesson from this. Sagt the Gemara, Abaye bar Ovin, Verab Chanine bar Ovin, these two brothers. Machlefi sudesayu la dodi. They would exchange their sudas with one another, the suda of Purim. So there's two pshatim in this. Rashi's pshat in the Gemara is that this is talking about Purim. You have to have a suda, so they couldn't both afford to have the suda of Purim. So one year one ate by one, and the one year he ate by the other. They would go to one another for the Suda of Purim. That's what it's saying. But the Ran says, the Pshat on this Gemara is, it's speaking about regarding Mishloach Manos, that they couldn't afford Mishloach Manos. So what would they do? They would just exchange what they prepared for their meals of Purim, and just by exchanging the meals, that was the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. Omar Rava said, a person should be intoxicated on the Yontiv of Purim. And Rashi here says, with wine. And it says in the Mefarshim, it's a zecher also to the Mishta Hayayin that Esther made. Adela Yada bin Orer Haman leBarach Mordechai, to the extent that he can't distinguish between Orer Haman and Barach Mordechai. No, so there's so many pshatim in this Gemara, whether it means kipshute, whether it means shalei kipshute. There's the famous Ramah that says that a person could sleep on Purim, and then he could be in a matzav if he's sleeping, that he doesn't know bin Adar Hamel Baruch Mordechai. So, and this Bechlal is, of course, the question of this Gemara. What's the point of this? What's the point of getting intoxicated to this point? So in Chassidus it explains that this is the whole inyan of a simcha that's l'mayla mitam v'das. That the simcha is something that it goes out of all boundaries. So what's this inyan of Adla Yada ben Har Ramal Baruch Mordechai? This is the inyan of tshuva. When you come to Aved of tshuva, you can take even something that was in Gimel Klippus Atmeis, which was in the place of Adar Haman, and you can elevate it into Kedusha. It could turn into a Baruch Mordechai. When you do an Aveda, which is of a tzaddik, which is limited, so then there's boundaries. But when you are Bal Tshuva, then Zedainis get elevated and become Zachiyas. That's what the Gemara here means of this Lamayla Mitam V'das. That's one of the pshatim that it says in Chassidus in this Gemara. Rabbi and Rab Zera of the Sudas Purim Badi Adodi. Rabbi and Rab Zera made a Sudah of Purim together. If some, and they became intoxicated. What happened? Come Rabbi Shachtel Rab Zera. Rabbi got up and slaughtered Rab Zera. Lomachar, the day after, Boy Rachmei, he begged mercy of Hashem, va'achye, and he revived him. Shana, the following year, Omalei, so Rabbi tells Rab Zera, Neisima v'navet Sudas Purim Badi Adodi, come join me again for the Sudah of Purim. Omalei, so Rab Zera answered, Loi b'chol shaita v'shaita misrachish nisa. Not always will a miracle happen. I'm not going to rely on the fact that there'll be Tchias HaMeisim again. So again, on this Gemara, there are many different shatim. There's the famous sikha that the Rebbe said on this Gemara, and the Rebbe said that the pshat of the Gemara is kipshutai, that he slaughtered him, that he passed away kipshutai. However, it doesn't mean kipshutai that he slaughtered him. What it means is similar to what it says in Chumash, the story of Nadav and Avihu, that when they saw such great Gilui Elikos, this brought them to Kaloi Sanefesh. So too, Rabbe Shachte, Ein V'Shachat Elo Mashach, he elevated him and he brought him to Kaloi Sanefesh. That's what happened over here. Rabbe, his name, Rabbe means it was in a higher level. Rabbe Zeta means small. And he overwhelmed him with this tremendous Gilui Elikos. What happened the following year? So why did he ask him to come again? Because Rabbe was thinking that over the year, Rabbe Zeta, his level was higher already. And he already came to his level like Rabbe himself. So therefore he said, now I'm ready, I think that you're ready to join me this year. But Rabbe Zeta said, no, I'm not 100% sure, I'm not guaranteed. The kavana is to be in a neshama beguf over here in this world, not to have kalei sanefesh. That's the Rebbe's pshat. Sagt the Gemara, Amarav Sudas Purim Shachla Balayla. If you eat the meal of Purim at night, lo yotzi dechivasa. You're not yotzi your obligation. It has to be by day. My timer. What's the reason? Yemei mishta v'simcha ksev. So Yemei means by day. The Rebbe used to bring this pasuk in a few sichas. The Rebbe teaches Yemei mishta v'simcha is also telling you there's a few different mitzvahs on Purim, but there's only one mitzvah which is the mitzvah of the very day itself. This is the day of mishta v'simcha. Every moment of the day is mishta v'simcha. Mikra Megillah, you do the mitzvah and the mitzvah is done. But the mishta v'simcha, that is what the essence of the day is. Ravashi, Abba Yosef, Kamei, the Rav Kahane, or others are going to say, the Ger says Ameimer. He was sitting in front of Ameimer. Noga, so it was Purim day and it was getting late. V'lo Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan didn't come to learn like they usually did, to come to learn by Ameimer. Amalei, so Ameimer says to Ravashi, my time lost Rabbanan. Why didn't the Rabbanan come to learn? Amalei, so he answered him, because Dilmatridi b'Sudas Purim. Maybe they're busy with having their Sudah of Purim. Amalei, so he said, why do they have to have the Sudah today? They couldn't eat the Sudah of Purim last night. Amalei, so he answered him, how could they do that? Lemar. Did you not hear what Rav said? That Sudas Purim sha'achla balayla, the Sudah of Purim that you ate by night, lo yotzi dechivasa. You're not yotzi if you eat it by night. Amalei, so he said to him, really? Amar Rava hachi. Did Rav say this? Amalei in. He said, yes, this is what Rav said. You must have the Sudah by day. Tana minei arboin zimnin. So he didn't notice halacha, and he wanted to be sure that he was going to remember it. So he reviewed it 40 times to make so to be in the memory. And he remembered it clearly, like something you have in your wallet or in your pocket. So the Mishnah. So now the next few Mishnayos here, we're going to be discussing subjects that are not related so much to Purim, really, or not really at all related to Purim, because it said in the previous Mishnah, Ein Bein, that there's no difference between Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni. So this Mishnah here brings up other subjects where we also find Ein Bein. Sagt the Mishnah, sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Ein ben Yontif l'Shabbos. There's no difference between the Isser of doing Malacha on Shabbos and on Yontif. Elo eichel nefesh bulvad. The only thing is when it's for preparing food, so then on Yontif it's allowed and not on Shabbos. Rashi points out that this is of course not including the fact that on Shabbos if you do a Malacha you chayiv skila, and on Yontif if you do a Malacha it's not skila but it's kares. But that the Mishnah is not saying that einish. It's not getting into that. Zok the Gemara. So what do we understand from this Mishnah? So now the Mishnah says that the only thing that's different is to do a malacha that's actually in the food itself. How about preparing something for the purpose of cooking food? And Rashi later brings an example. Let's say you don't have a knife and you need to prepare a knife in order then to go and use it for the food. So Zev Zeh Shaven, they're both the same, that even on Yontif that's not allowed. So this is a Mishnah here that's not like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya in Abraisa we learned, Ein ben Yontif l'Shabbos elo eichel nefesh. There's no difference between Yontif and Shabbos, only malacha that's actually done in the food itself. Rabbi Yehuda mate, but Rabbi Yehuda says, Af machshirei eichel nefesh. Even doing a malacha that prepares a utensil or whatever it is for the food, that's also allowed in Yontif. So the Gemara now explains the source of their machlokes. My time at the Tanakama. What's the reason of the Tanakama? Because Omakra, the pasuk says, who? This is the full pasuk over there is, who levat says, Ach yilachem kamalacha leyasim achashi yachal lechol nefesh. That you can do what you need for eichel nefesh. And then the pasuk says, who levada yasal lechem. So that word who is coming to exclude something. So he says, who v'loy machshirav. Only what you need for eichel nefesh, but not what is preparing something for eichel nefesh. And Rabbi Yehuda says, it says lochem. Why does it say that word lochem? Lochem lochol tzarchechem. Anything that you need for your needs, for the food, not only in the food itself, but even also to prepare something for the food. Okay, so we have a hu that excludes, and we have lachem that comes to be marbet, to include even the machshirei eichel nefesh. Now the Gemara will explain what each one does for the other drasha. V'edoch nami, according to the Tanakame, haksiv lachem. Doesn't it say lachem, which means everything? So he says no. He darshans differently. Lachem means v'loy loyev dikachavim. You can't do any melacha of food if it's for a guy. Or lachem v'loy leklavim. You can't do melacha for food if you're feeding a dog. Now v'edoch nami, the other opinion, haksiv hu. It says in the pasuk hu, which comes to exclude not machshirei eichel nefesh. Hu ksiv. So yeah, he says. Again, ve'idach nami haksiv hu. So he answers him and he explains him. Ksiv hu or ksiv lachem. It says two things. It says hu, which is an exclusion, and it says lachem, which is coming to add everything. So how do we darshan this? We darshan it as follows. Kam b'machshirin she'ef shelasayis erev yontif. If you have a situation of a utensil, let's say the knife. Let's say the knife it broke, but it broke earlier on Erev Yontif. You had time to prepare it before Yontif. If you had time to prepare it before Yontif, for that you have the pasuk of who to say that you can't prepare it on Yontif itself. What happens if the knife broke right before Yontif or on Yontif itself? So then that's something that you could prepare even on Yontif, even though it's not a malacha in the food. It's a malacha for the machshir for the food. That is allowed to be done on Yontif itself. This is Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha, by the way, in Shulchan Aruch is like Rabbi Yehuda, like the more lenient opinion, not like the Tanakama. As long as it's something that you couldn't do before Yontif, even machshirei eichel nefesh is also allowed. I'm giving the mashal of Rashi, a knife. If you don't have a knife, you have to sharpen a knife and so on. Yeah, Zok Heilige Mishnah, Ein ben Shabbos Yom Kippurim. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yontif. And the only difference actually is the punishment. El shezeh zedayni b'dei Adam. Over here in Shabbos, if you do a malacha b'mezid, so you chayiv skila and bezdin, v'zeh is doini b'kares. And on Yom Kippur, if you do a malacha b'mezid, and you chayiv kares. Zok the Gemara holi in tashlumin. But when it comes to a situation where doing a malacha on Shabbos or Yom Kippur will affect your payment that you owe someone, and the Gemara will bring the example in a second. Zev v'zeh shavin. It seems like for that they're both the same. If so, Mani Masnisin, who's our Mishnah? Rav Nechunya ben Akana here. We'll go according to Rav Nechunya ben Akana and not according to the Chachamim that argue. So what are we talking about payment here? So the Gemara brings the Tanya. This is the halacha known as Kamlei b'derabba minei. So we learned in the Braisa, Rav Nechunya ben Akana oime. Haya oise, again, Rav Nechunya ben Akana, Haya oise es Yom HaKippurim ki Shabbos l'tashlumin. Rav Nechunya ben Akana said that Shabbos and Yom Kippur are the same when it comes to payment. What payment are we talking about? Ma Shabbos, just like on Shabbos, mischayev benafshay, in a case where you're chayev misa because of what you did, upater benat tashlumen, so you're going to be pater of paying money. Again, this is kamle b'derabim minei. What's the example for this? So Rashi brings the typical example. If you go on Shabbos and you light on fire someone else's godish, someone else's pile of food, so you just damage his property. You owe him money for that. But you also did a malacha of lighting a fire on Shabbos, and you chayev misa for that. So because you chayev a much harsher punishment of misa, so you're not chayev to pay. That's what's called kamle b'derabba minei. The greater punishment patters you of the payment. So Rav Nechunya ben Akana says, just like you have a greater punishment on Shabbos that you chayev misa, the same is with Yom Kippur. Af Yom Kippurim is chayev benafsha, you pater benat tashlumen. Because you mischayev benafshi, you'll be pater of paying. And that's even though on Yom Kippur, you're not actually chayev misa and bezdin, you only chayev koris b'dei shemayim. But nevertheless, that's considered to be that you mischayev benafsha and you pater to pay. That's only Rav Nechunya ben Akana's opinion. But the Chachamim disagree with this. You only say kamle b'derabim minei if it's a case where you actually chayev misa b'dei adam, not koris. Koris is not going to pater you of paying somebody. Tanan, also we learned in the Mishnah, it says, Kol chayove krisus shaloku, anybody that's chayev koris, he did an aveda which there's koris for. And when the Eidim warned him, they warned him that you can get malchus for you, what you're doing. It's also a lav, so they warned him that he can get malchus. So there's koris or malchus. So what shaloku, if the guy got malchus, nifteru midei krisasan. You don't get koris. He's pater from the koris because he got malchus. Shenema, because the pasuk says, "V'nikla achicha le'einecha," that your brother will be embarrassed in front of your eyes when he gets malchus. So what do we learn from this? Kivin shalaka. Once he got his malchus, harei kachicha. He's like your brother again, and he doesn't get any koris. Divrei Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. This is Rab Chananya ben Gamliel's opinion. Rab Yochanan said, Chaluk and all of Chaveirav, Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. The Chachamim disagree to Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. So where do we see that they disagree with Rab Chananya ben Gamliel? Amar Rave, so Rave said, Amri Beirav, so they said in the Yeshiva of Rav, Tanine, we learned in our Mishnah, Ein ben Yom Kippurim l'Shabbos. There's no difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbos. El shazeh zedayne b'dei adam. When it comes to Shabbos, what's the punishment? A misa that you get in Bezdin. And v'zeh zedayne b'koris. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the punishment is only koris. Now, but v'im misa. If Rab Chananya ben Gamliel is true, it was right, and the Tana of our Mishnah agrees to him that once you get malchus, you pater from the koris. So then if so, idi v'idi b'dei adam. So then Yom Kippur is also a punishment that you can get from the Bezdin, just like Shabbos. Why? Because even if it's something that you would be chayev koris for, but if you got warned about the malchus, and you got the malchus, you get a punishment b'dei adam of malchus. Just like by Shabbos, you get a punishment from the Bezdin of skila. So therefore, this was the source that the Tana of our Mishnah disagrees with what he said. So the Gemara gives two answers to say that it's not necessarily so. So Rav Nachman said, or others are going to say, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, Ha mani Rab Yitzchak. Our Mishnah is not arguing for this reason. He has actually a different reason why he's arguing. He's going according to Rab Yitzchak. What did Rab Yitzchak say? The Omar, Malkis b'chai v'krisis leke. There's a person that does an Aveda, that there's a chiyuv of koris, there is no malchus. Even if you warned him that you will get malchus, there still is no malchus b'chlal in this. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Yitzchak chayve krisis b'chlal. If you look in the pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, I believe it is, where it brings all the arayas that you chayev koris for, so it says there that you chayev koris for everything. All inclusive, and then Avaloma Yotzes Koris Ba'achoise, and then the pasuk spells out separately regarding one that has a relation with his sister that you get Koris for that. Why does it spell it out again separately? Because it's coming to tell you L'doine beKoris v'loy b'malchus. It's coming to teach you this halacha that you get only Koris and not malchus. And from that we understand that the same is true regarding all Koris. Once there's a oynish of Koris, there is no malchus. That's the reason why our Tana argues. This is one answer. Another answer the Gemara says, Rav Ashi Omar, Afilatayme Rabbanon. We could even say that our Mishnah is according to the Rabbanon that you could get malchus for koris. And the Mishnah over here would agree to Rab Chananya ben Gamliel that once you get the malchus, you'll be pater from the koris. So then why did it say in our Mishnah that by Yom Kippur there's no punishment bidei Adam? The answer is very simple. Zeh, when it comes to Shabbos, ikir zedaina bidei Adam. The main punishment for Chil Shabbos is the skila bidei Adam. V'zeh, when it comes to Yom Kippur, ikir zedaina bidei kares. What's the main punishment? The main punishment is kares. In the event that you already gave a malchus, then it'll become part of the kares. But the main punishment is the kares, which is bidei Shamayim.